Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're dialing in around the world. First of all, thank you very much for attending this session and just having to redial in. We had a problem on one of the computers, it froze, so my apologies about that. But looks like everyone's back in now, which is great news. I have the pleasure of having Glenn with us today from RICOH. Say hi, Glenn.
Hi, Colin. How are you?
I'm absolutely wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today.
No
Um,
problem. My pleasure.
yeah, it's Glenn's been on a really interesting journey, and the team at RICOH Canada have been on a really interesting journey. Um, and I get a lot of organisations turning around to me and saying, "Yeah, love the theory, love the what you're saying, but prove to me that this stuff works. Prove to me that all of these things work." And so, really glad to have Glenn and the team being able to tell their story today. So, just a couple of introductions before I pass over to Glenn. Um, for those of you that don't know us, and it's great to see that we've got some clients on the line, so welcome to you. For those of you that don't know us, Beyond Philosophy are literally one of the first customer experience consultancy organisations that there's been. We've been doing this since 2002. We work globally. I've written 5 books on the subject, and in fact, what Glenn and the team have been doing is obviously reading the books and using that methodology to help guide them to what they're doing. We're not just looking at the rational side of an experience; we look at an emotional side of an experience. And again, really fascinating for us that obviously Glenn's in a business to business setting, and therefore that emotional part of things. And we're pretty evidence based in what we do. We work with a number of different blue chip companies around the globe. This is just a small smattering of the companies that we are working with and have worked with over the period of time. And last thing that I'm going to say I'm going to let Glenn take over. A bit of a book plug. My latest book is out, which is an ebook, Unlocking the Hidden Customer Experience. And for those people attending this webinar, you will be able to go onto our website and download this using the webinar 50 code for 50% off. So only $5 or $4.99. And I'll remind you of that later. Um, I'm going to pass over to Glenn now, and maybe Glenn, we could just start off with a bit of your background. Glenn's going to do a bit of a presentation. I'm going to jump in and ask some questions as we go. You'll see that there is a question panel as usual on your webinar control system. We will allow enough time at the end to ask as many questions as we can. The most popular question that everybody asks is this presentation going to be available? And the answer is yes, we are recording this. This will be then put up on the website. So if you want to pass this on to a colleague or whatever, then they're going to be able to view it on our website after this. So, Glenn, perhaps you could just start off by giving us a bit of your background and a bit of background to RICOH, and then we can start flicking through going through the deck.
Sure, and thanks for having me, Colin. I really appreciate the opportunity to tell RICOH Canada's story. It's been a great journey following this process, and I'm happy to go through the process and the results of what we've been encountering, and both the good, the upside, and the downside. I believe it's a real barometer as it relates to our relationship with our customers, and quite frankly, we pay very close attention to it, which you'll find out through this presentation. My background is I've been in this industry literally for over 30 years, and therefore, while it's constantly changing, the one thing that I do understand and I do appreciate is the voice of the customer and where the customer fits into the equation as it relates to RICOH Canada. We are known as not just a manufacturer, but a global player in the office equipment business, but transforming into the services part of the business, which makes our attention to the customer's perspective all the more important, actually, as we transform the business to be more services led and tied to delivering services to customers beyond hardware, beyond break and fix capabilities, and start to work with them in that fashion. I've been in the CEO role for the last 7 years, in my 8th year, and this journey began, when this journey began, I should say, I was actually the EVP, or the Executive Vice President of the Direct Operations in Canada for RICOH. We're about a $500 million business in Canada, coast to coast, 2,250 employees at this stage, and growing. And we've been growing for decades in this country. So let me start it off with really the first slide, and its references our customer experience statement. I think this is important for us to communicate to everybody on the line today, because our objective from a business perspective is to be recognized as an industry leader and a trusted brand. And that's an important component of the relationship that you have, of course, with your customers. But we want to be that trusted brand in the digital evolution of the workplace through highly engaged employees that provide an exceptional customer experience. And those words get spoken an awful lot inside of RICOH Canada. We're going to talk about this journey today, but I'm going to speak as much about culture as I'm going to speak about the journey in every respect. So that delivering an exceptional customer experience, and that all employees inside of RICOH Canada have that as part and parcel of their job description, is fundamental to, I think, the success that we've accomplished, or the success we've seen around the customer experience. If you go to the next slide, I'll take you to the beginning of our journey. It was in 2003 where we recognized as a management team, our president at the time, a fellow by the name of Martin Brodigan, was very much leading the way in terms of trying to move the culture in the right direction. And one of the things that we recognized was that we were just too internally focused. We would be in meetings and speaking to process and speaking to procedures and speaking to policy and things of that nature. Well, we weren't necessarily always counting on the voice of the customer or the perspective of the customer in those meetings. So our culture really was not as focused on the customers as it needed to be, and nor was it any different or any better perhaps than any of our competitors. So we really didn't have a customer differentiator in our minds inside of the organization. So the opportunity was to create that kind of culture by putting the customer first in everything that we did, to make it everybody's job, as I mentioned earlier, to deliver an exceptional customer experience. And so as I reflect on the beginning of this process, I remember being in boardrooms, and we were actively asking ourselves when we were making decisions as to whether or not there was an impact on the customer, or what the impact on the customer would be. Where is the customer in all of this, these decisions that we're making, or things that we were doing internally as an organization. And I think gradually the executive team started to recognize how important that was, and the fact that we didn't have it really led us in a direction where we essentially began the journey. If you go to the next slide, I'll talk about.
Maybe I could just ask you a question there and jump.
Sure.
So was there a catalyst? Was there, was it solely sort of built from hey, there's an opportunity here, or, I don't know, are we just a bunch, or?
I think the catalyst was partly from an opportunity. I had been in the business, and I know that I was leading the sales organization, and recognizing that our competitors weren't necessarily treating their customers in the best way. Now, when we reflected upon it, we were probably not doing anything different, Colin.
Right.
And I did see the opportunity that we could edge out competitors simply because we could grow the, call it the retention level of our existing customers, while we were taking away from competitors.
Sure.
their customers, and that was essential for
Right.
our growth.
Right. And was there much resistance? Because again, I'm thinking of people that are, in the place now where they're starting a program, and you get the naysayers going, well, everybody's the same. We need to focus on just getting prices down or a better product. Or so I know it was a while ago, but was there any sort of resistance, and how did you overcome that?
No, I would say that there was very little resistance. I would say that there was more, the challenge was more in the way that we could calibrate and perhaps generate the objective or meet the objective that we had, which was basically to hold on to our customers longer than anybody else in the industry. So how to do that was more of a mystery at that point in time. But
Right.
everybody fundamentally understood that, hey, if we're treating our customers better than anybody else is, the reality is that, there's going to be a tendency that we're going to be able to hang on to them longer than anybody else as well,
Sure.
which bode well for our future.
Right.
I think when we first began, and it was your first book, that we had a fellow inside our organization by the name of Jacques Chartrand rather, and Marianne was on the team. Marianne Sayers was on the team, and we discovered the philosophy, the Beyond Philosophy initiatives, and where the customer experience sort of stemmed from.
Yeah.
I recall very, very explicitly the analogy that we had used internally, which was around the European approach to acquiring, for example, today's groceries for this evening's meal, and how you might have 2 or 3 butchers on the same street in France, and essentially the fact is that buyers were making decisions emotionally by going to the same butcher all the time, as opposed to necessarily the one that was closer, the one that was cheaper, the one that they didn't feel as comfortable in. And so consequently, we use that conceptual in our discussions to understand that customers were making decisions on an emotional basis, because when all things were even, what do they decide upon? They were deciding on going with the organization that made them feel, the best, or feel most comfortable.
Sure.
So.
Sure. Good. Okay. I won't interrupt you. I'll go on to your next slide.
No problem. So the next slide, which is really the beginning of the customer journey, we wanted to become a market leader. We were in number 2 position at the time, despite having almost a third less sales agents in the marketplace we are in Canada. We still were a close second to the market leader. We needed to create a customer-centric culture, no question about it, in the organization. That's what we wanted to do. We needed to preserve and position rather our service excellence, which is our technical capabilities in field. We have almost 600 technicians talking to customers every day. And then last but not least is we had to develop a value proposition that was based on, of course, the customer experience, and we needed to do that across the board within the organization. Had to be something we could live, and that was fundamental. Living it, on the next slide, you'll see that how we began to live it was we first created a cross-functional team of 16 employees within the organization that were not necessarily the executive team. They were, in fact, the future leaders of the organization. Through process and discussion and dialogue around what customer-centric really meant, we developed a customer-centric program for the organization, which was a lot of communication, no question about it, but it was also data-based and looking at the potential or opportunity as it related to keeping our customers longer than others. We built confidence within every part of the organization, and our employees knew more about serving the customer than they give themselves credit for. There was a lot of things that we were doing well, but there was little question that we took those things for granted, whereas our customers didn't necessarily. Upon interviewing customers and having dialogues with them, or even going on what was referred to as customer safaris, we were able to pick up a great deal of insight in terms of what good looked like.
Yeah.
We began. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. So when I'm just thinking, Glenn, about uh, I know the answer to this question, but the audience won't. When you say across the organisation, do
Yeah.
you literally mean everybody, or do you mean front-facing people, or what do you mean?
I mean everybody, and it started out with, and on one of the next slides, I'm going to talk about customer touch points. And it became evident at first we just thought it was about customer touch points, Colin, and then we evolved from there. And now today, I firmly believe that the only way we got to where we got to was because it went from just customer touch points to everybody in the organization. It was the only way we could get culture deeply rooted in the organization around customer focus and the customer experience, is because it can't be some of the people's responsibility. It has to be everybody's responsibility to look after the customer.
So again, I know the answer to this, but I think you're eloquent in speaking about this. So if I then say, well, yeah, but that's fine, but you know what, I'm in HR, that doesn't actually mean very much to me. I'm in finance, I'm in legal, I don't touch the customer. Then
Yep.
how do you get all of that on board?
Well, it became quite easy. Originally, we thought it was tough. If you see the next slide, I'll just sort of link it to the my customer touch point slide.
Yeah.
You know, the original 7 touch points within the organization were highlighted here. So sales, technical service, dispatch, accounts receivable, telemarketing, customer sat team, and our metery team. These were the 7 areas of the organization that actually spoke to customers, whether the customer was calling into us or whether that we were in front of the customer selling and or fixing machines and things of that nature. Every single one of these 7, therefore, were the focal point originally in terms of delivering a great customer experience, an exceptional customer experience. It wasn't long after that, though, that we started to recognize that the support mechanisms inside the organization, people that supported each of these 7, or for that matter, and I'll give you a great example, in the case of, our supply chain business or our distribution business, from the warehouse, a pick ticket drops. It has several components to a machine, for example, that would be going out. Doing a great job in that particular area is going to mean that all aspects of that product has been created or been packaged up to be shipped to the customer. Communicating from dispatch standpoint that the tech is now ready to go to the customer site. If the technician had gotten there and only it was missing an accessory or was missing a small unit that would make that install a perfect install, then essentially we are delivering a poor customer experience at that point in time. Now, who's involved? Quite frankly, it could be distribution, it could be at the order entry, it could be at the dispatch area, it could be at the technical area. But in reality, it's all of us who, in fact, could be involved in delivering something less than an exceptional customer experience if we were to short ship an accessory. So it became very obvious to us that it wasn't just these 7 touch points. It was everybody in the organization that could and would have a direct impact on whether or not that experience was the kind of exceptional experience we were driving for the customer.
Right.
And if on the next page, for example, this is the transition that we recognized is that if you go beyond those touch points.
I just want to make sure I'm syncing up. We're on the My Customer Touch Points?
We're on we're on the next one, the next page.
Yeah.
Which is page customer touch points.
Yeah.
Where every RICOH employee plays a part in providing an excellent customer experience. And this is my point about the culture, is that if you only had half your organization or the 7 touch points that really, really devoted and cared about delivering a customer experience, my sense is that you're not going to get there. A, it's not deeply rooted in the organization from a cultural standpoint, and B, you're going to have support mechanisms that are involved, and if that's not recognized, then essentially you could fail the internal customer in some respects, as I described in that example, being the technical service employee. You could fail them and end up failing, obviously, the customer from an experience standpoint. So going beyond those 7 touch points was a discovery component to our journey. We first started out with the 7, and then recognized that, this is way beyond just the 7. It is everybody in the organization.
Right.
And ultimately, we looked to center delivering an exceptional customer experience onto every employee's objective. The raison d'etre, for example, in terms of coming to work, was to deliver an exceptional customer experience. That's what I do. That's what I expect everybody in our organization does every day.
Right.
That's the first order of business.
Right.
And so that you see just a wide array, of course, of areas where we could be touching the customer, whether it be in reception, obviously the meter reads, as I mentioned, but even the way we were putting PR, public relations out, or how we were handling things like distribution, or any sort of aspect of our business could have a direct or indirect component or impact on customer experience.
Right.
So once we established that, we took the next step, which was to create departmental, and it's on the next slide, Colin. It's a departmental value propositions which were centered around delivering an exceptional customer experience. So if you were in our leasing department or our contracts department, or for that matter, our HR department or legal department, you had the department heads work with the people within their organization to develop a value proposition that was a departmental value proposition that was directly tied to how it is they could best serve the objective, which was to deliver an exceptional customer experience. In legal, sometimes that meant that they were going to be responsive or more responsive to requests from customers on terms and conditions. It didn't mean that we were going to do everything that the customer wanted us to do, because there were certain things that were either outside of our capability or were just simply not feasible, financially feasible. I used to use the reference that suggested if the customer came to us and asked us to gold plate their device prior to shipment, we would put our hands up and say we couldn't do that. And so we might be at risk in terms of not delivering an exceptional customer experience there, but we would also be recognizing that, what we do, in fact, is deliver this type of product and this type of capability to our customers, and that's where we focused our energies in terms of delivering a customer experience. So anything that was way outside there, and there was not very much, by the way, that was way outside from a request standpoint from the customer, that we would try to bring it back into what our functional capabilities are and were in order to best deliver that customer experience.
So perhaps I can just explore this a little, because there's a couple of things there that I think you said that are really important. One of them is that that everybody is responsible for pulling it together, and obviously we're going to talk about metrics and stuff like that in a bit. But that is, as we've talked about before, is unusual. Most organisations resist passing customer metrics, net promoter, things like that through the organisation. Can you talk a bit more about the philosophy and the why you think that's needed and stuff?
Sure. Again, philosophically, it was a situation where we believe that delivering an exceptional customer experience was a cultural mandate. And therefore, if it's a cultural mandate, you couldn't have just a portion of your employee base focused in on it or caring about that. Just in the same way, you couldn't have just a portion of your organization, for example, that would be rewarded for and recognized for delivering an exceptional customer experience. Everybody had a part in the ultimate delivery system. So that philosophically, I think, was entrenched inside of our organization and understood. It was easily acceptable by the employees. Let me tell you, I don't think that RICOH Canada is different in this aspect. I think if you ask any employee for any organization, they can easily identify who the external customer actually really is, and that they have a innate desire to deliver something that is of value, and quite frankly, that ultimate customer is going to be satisfied with or happy with, or feel as though that they they would like to do business with you as an organization again. I think that's just fundamental to what people understood and thought inside of RICOH Canada. And as I said, I don't think that we were different from anybody else, any other organization. We just attended to it. We just delivered on trying to drive that through the organization. And once we were there, it was so simple to have dialogues and discussions around anything, any aspect of our business in terms of what's the impact on the customer. Are we doing our very best? Did we do our very best? And if we fail, what do we do about it? How do we recover? I use a kind of an example where, I at various kickoffs and town halls and things of that nature, I would always refer to that if something happens and it goes wrong, the tendency for an organization who's not focused on the customer is to run away from the problem, not respond to it, not deliver on trying to resolve or respectfully manage it with the customer. Most organizations, in my opinion, certainly ours, run to the problem. I used to say that, if there's a fire, running away from the fire is actually not helping the cause. If we have a problem, call it a fire, that we have to resolve on this particular day with this particular customer, we need to run to the fire. We need to resolve those issues as quickly as possible. And it's extraordinary how we can demonstrate through data to all of our employees that responsiveness, for example, or dealing with the issue in a proper fashion, the customer actually respects you more and thinks of that when they're making a decision down the road. And your tendency is to retain those customers because you solve the problem, because they do recognize that everybody has problems.
Sure. Good. Okay. Thank you.
So we go to those department value propositions really helped us cement and put into the minds and the hearts of the organization, regardless of they were front-facing customer touch points or not, the fact that we needed to all be able to deliver within each department on that customer experience. Now, if we go to the next slide, these are the metrics, and I'll get into some more detail here shortly, but in around 2006, we began the journey in 2003, as mentioned earlier, but in 2006, we started to utilize and measure the Net Promoter Score. That's the ultimate question in our survey system, that one question, which we get an answer to from, and I don't know if everybody's familiar with Net Promoter Score on the call, but it's the one.
Most people will be, Glenn.
Great. So we started to embed that question. It's question number 26 on our survey, in every survey that we ran, and every one of our customers are surveyed at least, well, actually once a year. We also have a secondary survey system, which we've also recently deployed, or not recently, but started to deploy the question, which is on the technical service survey system. Anyway, we began to measure it. Our first results weren't particularly good, and I'll talk about those in a bit. We also, at the time, however, started to recognize that the customer was in need of some helping hand, early on in the relationship with us. So we established what's known as a welcome call. So this is where we do an installation in Canada, and that customer would get a welcome call, just talking to them about what they're going to experience, especially if this is in the case of a new customer to RICOH Canada. We'll talk to them about how how did the installation go? How, do they require more training? How the meter read system works, how they can get in touch with us. And we would literally walk through those things with the customer on the phone so that their confidence would go up in terms of dealing with a new organization. Didn't take very long, and actually it really allowed us to connect with the customer. And it's at, everybody says that it's that first impression that counts. This helped us on that first impression basis, because if there was anything wrong, we were there to deal with it right away and move down the road. We initiated call quality and monitoring. So our dispatch systems, we had monitoring systems to allow us to become better at managing the customer experience on the phone. We also instituted a customer issue log, which was a fantastic program, or is a fantastic program still in existence inside of RICOH Canada, where if the customer were to raise an issue, even if they were just a phone reception, everyone would be able to enter that concern into a customer issue log, and immediately it's date and time stamped. It's assigned to the owner, the appropriate owner. We have measures and metrics to make sure that we meet a certain internal, call it service level agreement to resolve the customer's issue and or problem, as well as having an escalation process associated with it. And so that was put in place. And in fact, that tool was adopted by other countries inside of RICOH globally, because it was a real success inside of the fact that we could get the customer voice through that process as well.
And that's a sort of a customer. It's interesting in the word issue as opposed to complaint.
Right. Many times they weren't complaints; they were just an issue that they wanted to resolve, or they wanted to communicate that they were moving, for example, or they were changing their name, or maybe there was something wrong on their bill. Whatever happened to be the case, we would capture it, record it. We would isolate the kinds of issues that we were dealing with, and through that mechanism, we were able to identify whether or not perhaps we've got a problem over here, because we're getting more of those issues being raised by customers than perhaps in another area.
Yeah.
And we learned from that.
And tying the things together and just repeating it as well, because I think it's
correct
a message in terms of people running towards the problem. I would imagine because
correct
you're measuring and paying people on this, they're trying to solve these issues rather than going, it's a customer complaint thing and nothing to do with me. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Great.
On the next slide, it's mentioned exceptional support. In my opinion, the success did come from the support of the entire senior management team that we had at the time from the very beginning. We were very much attuned and made attuned to the fact that the voice of the customer was not necessarily present in everything that we were doing. Problem A. The strategy, when it was put in place, it was amazing how it was able to, and still does, eliminate siloed thinking. You could have perhaps misaligned compensation plans and creating conflict in your organization. And sometimes it takes a long time to figure those things out in terms of where people are coming from on why they dig their heels in on a specific aspect of the business. But what was interesting was that I think every organization has some level of this siloed mentality, but we educated people to say, well, hang on a second here. What do we need to do in order to resolve or satisfy or deliver an exceptional customer experience in this situation? And it completely, because we knew that was job one and every employee knew that was job one, everything else went away. And all they did was say, no, you're right. Let's work together and figure out what it is that we need to deliver on. Because that's when you've got it cemented in your culture, in my opinion, because that's the ultimate objective of every employee. So whether you're from the service organization or the sales organization or finance, what it is that you're trying to do is ultimately deliver that exceptional customer experience. And secondarily is what your department might be essentially rewarded or recognized for delivering internally on contribution or anything of that sort. And it's amazing how it just diffused so many situations. But at the same time, we'd say, well, maybe we're misaligned here. What do we need to do to fix that internally? So we're not on opposing sides. And it was a real side benefit, call it, of the dialogues that started to take place in the organization through this process.
Great. And again, that's because you've got the alignment, because everybody has got the same measure and it's affecting
Correct.
everybody, and their
Correct.
silos aren't aligned. It's not, it's your fault, it's my fault, it's both of our faults because we got to get this sorted out.
That's right. You'll notice at point 4 here how it's tied to the customer experience, and the Net Promoter Score is actually tied to the incentives for the entire organization. So from myself all the way down through the organization, the Net Promoter Score is something that we communicate on a quarterly basis, and is part of our balanced scorecard and our strat map initiatives, and it is part and parcel of the incentive or the short-term incentive plans that we have inside the organization. So everybody knows it and pays attention to it and understands it for sure.
And the key word there is everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah. Great.
So if you go to, I'm going to give you an example on the next slide of within the last 18 months. Actually, I would say it began 18 months ago, but it was installed just over a year ago. We began to recognize that we might have an opportunity, which we have now, coined as FACE, F-A-C-E, which represents or stands for Field Activated Customer Experience. And this is centered around an initiative that we took those 575 technicians, 575 technicians went through some training in terms of how to better engage and dialogue with the customers when they were at the customer location fixing problems of, or a machine had broken and or a machine was in fact in need of service. And what it did was take a really good part of our organization, by the way, that was already doing an extraordinary job, and just rounded out the idea that you're going to be engaging a customer here. This is the best way to do it. And we trained them on it. We positioned the field service managers to recognize whether or not we were delivering on it at the customer level when they were traveling with the techs. And it was extraordinary how that had a direct impact on increasing our Net Promoter Score. There are thousands of customer engagements a day. There's over 2,000 customer engagements through that area of our business alone. So with that degree of communication or opportunity for communication, we were able to, in fact, enhance or increase the level of satisfaction or the delivering or these customer experience. We were able to impact the customer experience in a very direct way through that training and that delivery mechanism.
Excellent.
And we're seeing it in results, and I'll show you those in a moment here.
Right, great.
So I've just got 2 slides left, and we can open it up for questions. But I'm on to the next slide, which essentially is the most recent Net Promoter Score slide. So it's our quarterly NPS results. You can see that we starting measuring NPS in Q2 of 2006, and our first number, of course, was 25, and that's not exactly a world-class number, as we would all know. But you got to start somewhere, and we recognize, well, we're way off the mark in terms of where we want to be and what we want to achieve. And over the course of the next really several years, 2.5 years, 3 years, you can see how we increased our scores dramatically. This last quarter, what's interesting about it is that, and I'll talk about this a little bit on the next page as well, but this last quarter we achieved a 69.07 score in our Net Promoter Score. And what I'd like to do is point you to the 7s and 8s, as well as what are the scores between 1 and 6, which are obviously detractors. 6.9% detractors in that quarter was the lowest number of detractors we've had, and 17.13 of 7 and 8s in itself is a great opportunity for us. If you look at the 8s, 241 8s, moving the 8s to a 9 will have a real big impact on our Net Promoter Score. So we've begun developing a campaign that's all about moving 8s to 9s. And if we can do that, Colin, we get into the world-class level of Net Promoter Score.
Yeah, right. Excellent.
I'll go to the last slide, and just to highlight a couple of things in terms of the last slide you'll notice, so this is of course, all the way back to Q2 '06, and how, there's some subtle changes, but there are some really impactful kind of components to, or data points on this particular Net Promoter Score, and I'll just point to the one. If you notice, in Q4 of 2010, we achieved a promoter score of 62, but we had a detractor score of 15.5, which in kind of recent history was the highest we'd ever had. And see the dip actually in promoters and the increase in detractors. And why I believe the Net Promoter Score is such a great barometer is because we did something going into that quarter, unintentionally, mind you, that impacted our customers. We had made an acquisition of another organization, and we were integrating their head office into our head office. We also had a call center in that particular building. We managed to measure exactly what we thought we needed in additional telephone lines, and we were not on voice over IP at the time. We were dealing with lines, and so that's a fixed kind of piece of infrastructure. So we did all the data, assessed it, put it in place, and the moment we put it in and had everybody come over, all of a sudden we hit the wall relative to consumption of the bandwidth that was coming into the building. And we had a real problem in terms of ASA, or average speed of answer, as well as the abandon rate into the call center. So we quickly diverted all of our technical people to call the Edmonton call center, and we just kept the bigger call center, which is the one in Toronto, to manage the inbound customer calls. That eased the problem, but did not solve the problem. The only solution for our problem was to actually get more infrastructure in place, more lines in place to broaden the bandwidth in order to manage the average speed of answer and the abandon rate. And so it took us almost 30 days, and we were measuring the ASA and the abandon rate every day, twice a day. But you'll notice why I say it's a barometer. You'll notice that drop in promoters, that increase in detractors in that particular period was immense. And this was damaging and hurtful, and it was disappointing, and we felt terrible about the fact that we had inflicted this upon our customers. We resolved it, and you'll notice that the very next quarter we were rewarded by the customers with actually our highest promoter score in the history of the Net Promoter Score system. And we've maintained that level and continue to grow it as we've been diminishing the number of detractors. And our next opportunity, honestly, is in that moving those 8s to 9s. And it's a campaign that will involve every employee of RICOH Canada.
Right. Yeah. Great.
So I'll leave it there. Colin, for questions, yourself or anybody else.
Yeah. No. Great. Thanks. Thanks, Glenn. Let me just reiterate, you've done an outstanding job, and it's always great to hear from organisations that have, taken the thoughts and believed in customer experience and moved it on. There will be a number of people that on this call that are frustrated with their organisation's lack of engagement and trying to work their way around how do they deal with the culture and all the rest of it. So you've done a really, really great job, and you and Marianne and the rest of the team at RICOH. So if you've got any questions, then in the well-worn manner, you'll know that there's a question box. We've got a few here that I can go through now. But if you've got any more, then please, we're going to spend the next 10 minutes just going through questions. So first one here is from Andy that says, how can you attribute an uplift in revenue to this culture change as opposed to external factors? I.e., how can you prove the value of making these changes?
I think that, while I believe it's actually difficult, you need to really spend some quality time actually expressing what it is you're going to measure. One of the things that we wanted to measure was there an improvement in our customer retention? And if you can keep your customers longer, obviously, as opposed to seeing them go to a competitor, essentially that improvement will ultimately deliver a better top and bottom line to you. especially if in fact you're continuing to be focused on taking away customers from your competition, which is accretive and additive to what it is you're trying to achieve. And so I think it boils down to customer retention. What's interesting about our journey is that as we're transforming and have transformed more into the services space, it's our existing customers who are really open-minded about taking on and adding certain services that we've introduced to them, and so consequently we get again accretive revenue per customer through the provisioning of services to those customers, and they wouldn't take those on if in fact they weren't at a high level of promoter mindset.
Sure. Okay, Jennifer Rolfe. Hi, Jennifer, down in sunny Miami. As a Canadian company, do you see any cultural differences between, versus US, European companies in the ratings provided by the customers when answering the survey? So this, I know from Jennifer, is, in other words, is an NPS score here the same as an NPS score in Europe and the same as an NPS score in the States and the Far East? Is there cultural differences that cause people to rate them differently?
We believe that it's one and the same. The simplicity of the Net Promoter Score mechanism and system, and that one question being the same in other parts of the globe, certainly make us believe that it is one and the same. There's organizations that we do benchmarks on in Canada. There's organizations that we do benchmarks on in the U.S. Not just in our field, but quite frankly, we take a look at who's the leading, Net Promoter Score organization in the United States as a benchmark. There's not enough. There's lots who look at it in Canada, some of the big telecommunications companies, the banks, but we also look cross-border and believe that it is one and the same. So whether it doesn't matter which organization is at the top of the Net Promoter Score each year in the United States, regardless of industry, we take a look at it and try to understand, geez, what are they doing right, and how do they get to that level of score? So I think it's fundamentally the same.
Okay, thank you. Got lots of questions coming in here. Santosh, not all customers are reasonable. Can you give an example of how you deal with a customer that has been unreasonable in the last 12 years?
Yeah, no question. We attempt to take the high road every time, obviously, because we don't know any other way. But you're right. We still have detractors. We still have customers that view what it is we do as much of a commodity, and quite frankly, the more they perhaps even demand of us, they believe that it's their right to do that in a commodity environment, especially if in fact, somebody else in the marketplace is willing to accommodate them. So we do recognize that, and we try to, and I think we do take the high road. You accept the fact that, some customers are going to leave you, and you need to be reasonable. There are times when, in fact, we will say, hey, we can't do that. So there may be something that a customer is asking us to do contractually, where we say, well, we can't do that. It's actually damaging our business, and as a result, we can't get that done. Now, those customers may choose to leave you, and to be honest with you, that's fine. I believe that's fine, because we're looking for customers who recognize value in what we're delivering, and recognize the customer experience, quite frankly, is an element of their decision-making process. So, I think you take the good with the bad. You never want to lose a customer, in my mind, but there are certain things that you just can't accommodate. But you'd be surprised how at times what they're asking for is plausible and feasible, and completely the organization is completely capable of doing it if they focus on maybe doing something different to deliver that from a customer perspective.
Sure. Good. Okay. Thank you. Another one from Michelle Patterson. Hi, Michelle. Did you go through any major senior leadership changes during this time? Was somebody from outside the company hired? So I guess that sort of, it's sort of Michelle's looking at this sort of catalyst of change, maybe.
Yeah. We've gone through several actually major shifts and changes relative to the executive team inside of RICOH Canada. We did an acquisition in late 2008 of an organization in our industry that had similar what we would call core values on paper, but they had almost 10 years been 10 years in decline in terms of losing customer base, whereas RICOH Canada had 10 years of increasing customer base. What was extraordinary, though, is that it comes from the top down, in my opinion, Michelle. It has to be the CEO that sets the pace. When I combined or created a new management team, the mandate around delivering an exceptional customer experience remained. And the people who were now on the team, or the new team, call it at that stage, which was a combination of us, RICOH Canada, as well as the organization that we acquired. It was absolutely mandatory that everybody bought into that approach. Some questioned it, didn't necessarily understand it for sure, but the reality is that it comes from the top down. It's my job, my responsibility to ensure that team is on point as it relates to the exceptional experience that we want to deliver to customers.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think the challenge is all organisations go through change, and how do you make that change not affect the overall strategy becomes key. I'm conscious of time, so we'll have one last question. So sure. This is from Miriel. Hi Glenn, do you have a recognition program around customer experience in place in your organisation? And if so, can customers nominate team members for an excellent customer experience they create?
Absolutely. And it's part of the reward system.
Right.
So what I would just I'm getting a bit of an echo back here. So.
Oh, okay.
One moment. I'll just turn off. So can you hear me, Colin?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
So we do have a recognition system. And how that works is that people internally can nominate someone else delivering an exceptional customer experience, and they're rewarded with points. And those points are used to get into the reward system that we've got and acquire products, not RICOH products, but other products and services that they may be able to get.
So, Glenn, it's Marianne.
Hey, Marianne.
You've got a lot of feedback going there.
Yeah, I know. I think we're at 5 o'clock now anyway. So Glenn, it just I'm gonna if there's anything that you want to sort of add, then please feel free to do so. But I just wanted to say thank you very much for taking the time to attend today and tell us about the story. As I said at the very front, lots of organisations talk about improving their experience. You've done it, and that needs a lot of applause and congratulations from us.
And I do appreciate that, Colin.
Good.
I would say in closing, I would say one thing, Colin.
Yep.
It's every employee inside of RICOH Canada that's made this happen. I also think that it's a source of pride that they achieve what they achieve relative to the Net Promoter Score, and it shows up in our results, and we celebrate it.
And they should be justly proud. So so well done to everybody in RICOH. If I was standing on stage, I'd be saying let's have a round of applause. But maybe it's just me.
So, thank you.
So thank you very much. Just a quick reminder: if you want to order the book, then you'll see the code on the screen. As you log out of this, you will be getting a questionnaire that just obviously asks how we're doing. Was this good? We run these webinars every month of one description or another. So we hope to see you on another webinar. And thanks very much, Glenn, and thanks very much, Marianne, for arranging all of this. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And let's be careful out there. Bye-bye.